Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, and you're listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. If you like what you hear, please press subscribe. And also, if you could leave a review and rate this podcast, that would be amazing. Thank you to the many of you who have already done that. It means so much to me, and I read every comment. So please review, rate, subscribe, and tell your friends about this podcast. Thank you. I'm so excited to discuss my sponsor today, which is Page One Books, because my summer book bundle is ready on pageonebooks.com. And the bundle that I've put together includes 3 books that I picked: Montauk by Nicola Harrison, More Myself by Alicia Keys, and I Miss You When I Blink by Mary Laura Philpott, all of which have been on this podcast here. It includes a Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books beach tote, a cute little library card pencil / cosmetic case, and a water bottle for staying hydrated, plus a little thing of sun lotion. So go to pageonebooks.com, page one with the number 1. So pageonebooks.com, and check out my Page One Books summer bundle. Buy it as a gift, a housewarming, if you actually go somewhere, or just give it to yourself. Everybody needs a treat. We've had a long spring. pageonebooks.com. Mary Morris is most recently the author of travel memoir All the Way to the Tigers. She is such an accomplished author and has written 3 story collections, 4 travel memoirs, including a memoir called Nothing to Declare, Memoirs of a Woman Traveling Alone. She's also written 5 novels, including The Night Sky, The Waiting Room, House Arrest, Gateway to the Moon, and The Jazz Palace. And she won the Rome Prize in Literature from the American Academy and Institute of Arts and Letters. She currently lives in Brooklyn, New York with her husband and teaches writing at Sarah Lawrence. Thank you, Mary. Thanks for coming on. This is such a pleasure.
Thank you, Zibby.
You said in your book, you said, people think that being a writer is a lonely job, but I am rarely lonely when I'm writing. It is only in the morning when I first wake up and once the sun goes down that my demons revive.
Right.
Can you talk to me a little about the demons?
Well, you know what? I'm not sure I really understand them exactly, but I have struggled with depression over my whole life. And also it's an interesting thing about being left-handed. There's a much higher percentage of depression in left-handed people. And I think that work has always gotten my adrenaline going, and I've always feel fulfilled when I'm working. And I sort of, in some ways, don't know what to do with myself so much once the sun goes down. I don't really like Sundays, and I don't really like the night very much. The mornings, I don't know. But I don't really know what the demons are, to be honest with you. I suppose it's about being lonely and feeling alone. I grew up, I don't think there's much hidden in this particular book. I grew up in a pretty dysfunctional family. And, I found for me, getting out, getting away, getting up and moving was the best antidote to the feelings I had in my own family home. One of the things I love, I've almost always had a dog. I love to take a morning walk. That's what really gets me going every day.
That's a good habit to get into.
Yeah, it is.
You wrote this great line about your mom that I feel like this describes an entire personality with this one scene. When you were at your father's memorial service and your mother complained first that the service that you had planned was taking too long. And then you wrote, over lunch, she turned to me and asked, "What's wrong, Mary? You look tired."
Yeah, my mother, again, you asked me earlier, is there anything that I, haven't been able to write about? And I think this is the book where I've really been able to be the most honest about my parents. And my mom, she just didn't really have the empathy thing. She didn't get it. She never grieved. The only person she ever grieved for was JFK. When JFK was assassinated, she cried and cried and cried. But, I think it's in the book. When our family dog was dying, she called a cab and she sent it to the vet in a cab alone. She didn't get it. So I don't know, I suppose it was her narcissism, but she just couldn't understand that what I was feeling and why I looked tired at my father's funeral was I was grieving. So that's a demon, I suppose.
Yeah, we'll just keep racking them up through this interview, and we'll have you all sorted out by the end.
Right.
But you've not written 5, and I'll come back to this book, but you've written 5 novels and 4 travel memoirs and 3 story collections. I feel like this is a dream for so many aspiring authors to be able to keep producing content like this throughout your life, really, and to keep reinventing what you want to say and who you want to be and all of that. Like, how do you do that? How do you keep finding new, exciting challenges in life and then also to write about?
Despite what we said about demons, I have always felt incredibly excited about life and very optimistic about the world, although at the present moment it's hard. But I feel I'm just, everything is a curiosity to me. I have very much a child's mind. I'm interested in everything. There's nothing that so there's always, there's always stories out there. There are always things that grab my interest. Of course there are lulls and there are things like that, but, I keep copious journals. I've kept journals since I was 13. And, my ideas are always in the journals. And so many of the books I've written in the travel book, like the first one I wrote, Nothing to Declare, Memoirs of a Woman Traveling Alone, I took the trip in 1978, but I didn't write the book until 1986. But everything was in the journal. So a lot of what I do in my process is I just write things down as they're happening around me. And then I'll go back and look at them and I'll just sort of, again, that's the kind of listen and silent. Like I'll go back and see what I said 5 years ago or even 10 years ago and find the gems in there that I want to keep, So it's just always been part of my process. And, one of the things I always say to young writers is, to me, a writer is someone who writes. It's pretty straightforward. And if you have a passion for it and you want to do it, you do it. And I love it. I love it when I'm writing. I'm never happier, I think, than when I'm actually writing. I also paint and I love to paint. I love doing those activities. I'm not so good in front of a football game, if you know what I mean. But I don't know. I've never had a shortage of ideas. Never.
I feel like after reading all the way to the Tigers, though, I would like to introduce you to my travel agent because I think that you can find some better accommodations where when you're taking these trips, when you were like freezing cold and there was no heat and no hot water and you're like in this, in the middle of India. I mean, this is like really roughing it.
Well, it just, yes, and what I don't know what, yes and no. A lot of that India is India. And in fact, where I was staying, particularly in Pench, was a lovely resort area. But yeah, the hot water and the cold water were switched, and I was incredibly sick. And for days, I didn't take a shower because I thought I only had cold water, and the cold was just freezing cold. I think the worst moment for me was the train ride back to Mumbai because there I was really sick and it was really cold. But I had asked my travel agent for a train ride. I'd wanted that. And she said, "Are you sure?" And I said, "Yeah, just get me a sleeping compartment." And it was a nightmare. So, part of it is me. not, I'm also not a very good planner. So a lot of what I'll do is I'll say, okay, I'm going to go do this, but I don't have an itinerary really. I did for this trip. I had a driver and I had a bit of an itinerary, but just a lot of stuff you can't control. But I'm not a good, one of the things I actually like to do more than anything in terms of traveling, and I'm fortunate to be married to someone who likes to share this with me, is we've done a lot of house exchanges. So we've swapped our house in Brooklyn for places, all over, really. And I like to go and plunk myself down somewhere and go to the markets and get to know the people. And I speak several languages and just immerse myself in a place rather than, I feel more like a traveler than a tourist. I'm not a very good tourist, but I probably could have had better accommodations. You're right about that.
I was kind of joking about it, but
no, I know.
But I could sense your frustration in the book when your tour guide wouldn't let you out of the car to go wander around, and you kept asking to go for a walk, and they were like, "No, we have to take you further away." And I felt like you were just about to explode in frustration at that time. I could really feel it through your words.
Well, when we were in the actual tiger reserve, I understood that they didn't want me to take a walk, and I look back fondly at the moment where I said, "Can I take a walk?" Because it was a moment in the reserve where there were creatures everywhere, water buffalo and all kinds of birds. And it was this beautiful wild boar. It's this beautiful bucolic setting. And obviously, if all these animals are out, there wasn't a tiger nearby. I knew that. I learned that on my trip. So I thought, well, maybe they'd let me take a walk, but of course they wouldn't. But the real frustration was when I wanted to visit some of the villages and we weren't in the tiger reserve anymore. And I was like, I just want to walk, And so that was frustrating to me. I felt very cooped up. I'm not a good person to coop up. I don't like to be confined. I always have to have an aisle seat. And, I didn't like the feeling that I couldn't get out and walk. I haven't been on safari in Africa, but people tell me that it's one of the constraints that people feel in Africa, which is they really don't let you get out and walk.
And speaking of walking, the
Yes.
big part of the book was your ankle injury and how
Yes.
you recovered from it, and how after a freak ice skating accident happened, you ended up having to have a massive surgery and having a second opinion, and someone said you were going to need ankle reconstruction, and you're coming to terms with sort of your limited mobility. How did not being able to function the way that you used to be able to affect you and your mood and all the rest? And how did it inspire you to want to go chase the tigers?
Well, that's just such a good question. And again, it's a little bit like the demons, because I must say that part of me doesn't entirely understand it. I just do better in motion. I like to be in motion. I like to joke that the subway is my stairmaster, that I like to be going somewhere. And, having this accident, and, it's in the book where my doctor says to me, when I said to him, after 3 months, he said, okay, your bone's healed, so you're good to go. And I'd actually brought walking shoes with me that day, and I couldn't take 2 steps because the pain was absolutely excruciating. And 2 weeks later, I went back to him and I said, when am I going to be normal? And he said, well, what do you mean by normal? And I just started weeping because I realized that I might never be, normal again. And that was when he told me that, a racehorse is put down for a lesser injury than the one I had. My bone was shattered. He said it was the worst ankle injury that he had ever had to deal with, and he is a trauma surgeon. So it was very, very difficult, and it was very psychologically difficult. And I think there was just that moment when I was reading Death in Venice, which wasn't going to cheer me up. But when I got to the sentence about he would go on a journey not far, not all the way to the Tigers, and I was laid up, it was Easter Sunday, I was stuck at home. Larry works on Sundays, so I was all alone. Our daughter was on her junior year abroad. And I just read that sentence over and over again. And I thought, when I walk, and I will walk again, I'm going to go to the Tigers. I'm just going to go. I'm going to figure it out. So, I'm pretty determined, I guess. I'm pretty determined. Yeah. Unstoppable.
How has this whole quarantine then affected you as someone who needs to be in constant motion? And now it's like a glorified being trapped in a moving car, like at home, essentially. How has that been?
Right. Well, I think my injury was kind of my learning experience for this moment. And first of all, I do walk every morning. We're in a remote place right now, so I see nobody. And so walking here is very easy. In the city, we live in Brooklyn. When I'm in the city, I walk the dog like at about 6 a.m. So I do get out like that. But one of the things I learned from my last time I was housebound was you have to be productive. And you have to find ways that are productive, that are meaningful, not only to yourself, but also to other people. So, for example, I do things for myself every day that I want to, self-care and all that, and my writing. But I also make a little list every day of who do I want to reach out to? Who might want to hear from me? Who could I check in on? And just try to give back also and be aware of other people and what other people are going through. So I found I'm actually extremely busy and productive at this time. And I think if I knew some of the lessons that I've learned in the first being housebound with my accident, I wish I had known some of it now. I wish I had been able to be more productive. I remember when I was laid up and I was really feeling sorry for myself. And a friend came over and she said, well, be grateful you didn't break your wrist. And that really stayed with me because I thought, I wouldn't be able to write if I'd broken my wrist. So, we have to be grateful for what we have. We have to assume that this isn't going to go on forever. One of the things they say about depression is it's a hole you fall into and you think it's never going to end. And that's what makes it so terrible for people. Like a child who thinks they've been left alone in a room and the mother's never going to come back. And you just have to, I don't know. I guess one of the things is, first of all, I'm excited about this book. I have a lot of work to do. We're expecting our first grandchild.
Aww.
And so that's quite exciting. And in fact, this remote cabin where we are is just down the road from our daughter, which is why we rented it. And I don't know, Zibby, you know, I feel very busy and very enlivened, and I'm not really minding it that much. I miss my friends. You know, I miss seeing people. But, you know, I do Zooms with them and things like that. So, you know, it's okay.
Well, that's great. I think staying busy in service to others, I agree, is sort of the key to the whole thing. And P.S., my wrist has been killing me for the last 2 days. And like, if you want, I mean, I'm sure your ankle injury was like horrific, but this is no fun. And I'm like, what am I going to do if I can't respond to my like hundreds of emails every day? Like, let alone like write something. So anyway, whatever, I'll be totally fine.
Yes, it's right. It's very scary if it's a part of your body that you really need. And yes, it was hard to be laid up, but I did learn some lessons from that. And they've been very helpful to me in this period. And being productive, I think, is really important for people, whatever form that takes.
And are you working on a new book now?
Yes, I am. I published a novel a couple of years ago called Gateway to the Moon. And I'm sort of it's kind of a sequel to it. Gateway to the Moon is about the secret Jews of New Mexico. These are Jews who fled to New Mexico during the time of the Spanish Inquisition. And we lived in New Mexico a number of years ago, and we had a babysitter who believed he was descended from these people. And I got interested in him and in his world, and I wrote Gateway to the Moon kind of based on his story. And after I finished Gateway to the Moon through a story that's way too complicated to go into, I found myself in contact with Jamaican Jews who also fled during the Inquisition, and their story is also fascinating. And I've never considered myself to be a Jewish writer per se, but I'm quite interested in buried histories and hidden histories and people who don't really know what their history is. And so I've really gotten interested in that whole world. And just as an aside, the cabin we've rented is actually owned by a descendant of Jewish pirates.
Wow. Who knew?
Which is a whole, right. Who knew, right? So, yeah, there's a book called Jewish Pirates of the Caribbean that I highly recommend. The new novel is kind of based on it, and it'll be published in, I think, 2022.
Oh, that's exciting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So do you have any final advice to aspiring authors?
Well, you know, I was sort of thinking about that you would ask me that. And I think the first piece of advice I have is, if you want to write, you write. You know, you just keep writing. Don't quit your day job. But if you feel passionately about it, you should write. And I think it's really helpful to find like-minded people. I mean, I have maybe about 5 friends that I will share my work with relatively often. Not in a workshop way, but you know, I can always call certain friends and say, "Hey, would you take a look at this?" or "What do you think?" I think it's important to listen to the stories inside of you and write them. And then when the time is right, you know, share them with people. But just keep doing it. I think that's my biggest piece of advice, is just keep at it. There are no guarantees. There's no one that can say, you know, don't think about what's going to happen to the work. Think about if you're taking pleasure and enjoying the process of doing it. You know, are you enjoying it? If you're enjoying it, just do it.
Love it. That's great advice. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. That's it.
Well, thank you. Thank you, Mary. Thanks for coming on.
Thank you so much.
This is such a pleasure.
And
thank
you.
Sorry for our technical snafus, but I'm glad it all worked out.
Sorry on my end also. I'm glad it worked out. It's lovely talking to you.
You too.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Okay, you take care. Bye-bye.
Okay, bye-bye. Thanks for listening to Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Please don't forget, subscribe, rate, and review this on iTunes. Tell your friends about it. Spread the word. Thanks so much for listening. I really appreciate it. Thanks so much to Page One Books for sponsoring today's episode. I hope you'll all check out my summer beach bundle at pageonebooks.com. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music. Thanks for listening. You can always email me at zibby@zibbyowens.com. soon.